Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammam sangham namasami. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo Buddhaya. Greetings everyone, good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Mindful Samadhi. Now this evening I'm going to be touching on a very, very important subject in regards to meditation, Buddhist meditation, and that is the four foundations of mindfulness. Now what we like to call this in Pali is Cattaro Satipatthana. So in my last couple of videos, I discussed a couple of other Cattaros, Cattaro Satipatthana, and what this is, basically Cattaro means the fours, okay? So in context in tonight, or this afternoon's discussion, we're talking about the four foundations of mindfulness. Now, what this is the core framework of mindfulness practice. Now, it's taught by the Buddha in the Satipatthana Sutta, which is the 10th sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, okay? It's also spoke about in other various areas in suttas that the Buddha's discussed, predominantly in meditation style suttas. So what we need to ask now is, what is the four foundations of mindfulness? Basically what they do is they aim to form a direct path for the overcoming of suffering and the realization of awakening. So what I do is I like to look at it as a fundamental toolkit for our meditation practice. So whether it be us meditating whilst we're walking, we're either sitting down, we could be standing, or we could even be laying down. We can use these four foundations for both the realization and for the awakening needed in order to achieve enlightenment in this very lifetime. So here is a brief summary of what they are. So before I go into more depth of each individual contemplation, we'll just quickly go over them. So the first, we have mindfulness of the body, which in Pali we refer to as Kayana. Second, we have mindfulness of feelings, which is Vedana Upasana. Third is mindfulness of the mind, or you could just say contemplation of the mind, which we call Chitta Upasana in Pali. And then lastly, the fourth one is mindfulness of mental objects, or dhammas, as we refer to this in Pali as Dhamma Upasana. So in short, what they are is a contemplation of body, feelings, mind, and mental objects, okay? Now, let's lean into these four foundations of mindfulness deeper so we can really get a proper understanding of them. So I really, really can't emphasize enough the importance that the four foundations of mindfulness has on our meditation practice. I literally reiterate this in each session I have with my students, because without these in our practice, I dare say it would be an extremely long meditation journey ahead with probably minimal results, okay? So it's imperative that we have the four foundations of mindfulness when we're practicing meditation. So before we open up these four concepts, what I want to do is I need to give a quick summary on the word mindfulness and what it means in regards to Buddhism, meditation, and our daily practice. So mindfulness in Pali basically means sati. So quite literally it means to be in the present moment as much as possible. With mindfulness, we want to essentially achieve a steady awareness with whatever we choose to observe. We want to ensure that when we observe the present moment, that we do it with non-judgmental and non-reactive attention and awareness. So how I can explain this is present moment awareness is something that a lot of us, we don't tend to have. We lose this as a child at an early age, because after the age of perhaps 4 or 5 years old, we start developing into a very systematic lifestyle of how this world around us is, and we kind of lose this childhood-like mind. Now, this childhood-like mind is what we're trying to achieve as adults. We want to revert back to this, because this is mindfulness. A lot of children, they actually have mindfulness. But then they lose it when we sort of bring them into this world and we create systems for them. It's nobody's fault, but it's just the way it's been for a very long time. So with mindfulness, we want to have present moment awareness. Now, how can we do this? I'll give you a couple of quick examples of a non-mindfulness situation. Would be when we like to lean on our subconscious mind with many things. So what I mean by this is when we go to get in a vehicle to, say, go to work in the morning or something, we grab our keys and we open up the door and we sit in the car, we put our hands on the steering wheel, we turn the ignition, start the car, we hit reverse, and then we drive away. Now, how much of that process do we do mindfully? Probably little to none at all, because it's our subconscious mind that is on auto response mode, and we just do this, or should I say auto reaction mode. And we're just automating these processes. We're talking on the phone while we're doing something else, or we might be stirring the pot or cooking dinner while we're talking to someone else. This is not being mindful at all, unfortunately. It seems like we're coasting quite intellectually through the world, through our daily processes, but unfortunately this isn't mindfulness. This is just a very automated lifestyle that we're leading. What mindfulness aims to do is to be very mindful in the present moment, and this gives rise to a thing called panya, which is wisdom. And the way we do this is we want to be aware of every process that we do. So for example, there's a bell over here. So what I could do is I can go and be aware of this reaching, the extension of my arm, the elbow, and then the grabbing of the bell, feeling the texture, the coolness of my skin on the metal, then the lifting of the bell, then the bringing over of the bell, and then the placing of the bell. All of this is being mindful in the present moment. Now I'm moving and I'm retracting my arm away from this and then placing it down. That is an example of mindfulness in the present moment. Or we could also call this sati sampajanya. Now, what sati sampajanya is basically means mindfulness with clear comprehension, or we are clearly comprehending a task that we are doing. Okay, so that essentially is sati sampajanya. Ideally, we want to have this in every moment of every stage of our life. This is easier said than done, of course, but that is essentially what we want to do. And when we practice meditation, especially mindfulness meditation, we can start educating ourselves on how to do this. We see the nature of how our mind is working when we sit with ourselves and we look inwards. We're not looking externally, we're not looking materialistically anymore, and we're looking inwards to see how everything's working inside, how our breath is operating, how our breathing is conducted. We don't consciously, we're never aware of our breath. Unless you're a meditation practitioner, we take this for granted. We're breathing in and out, nobody's thinking about it. Nobody's thinking that they even need to think about it. But essentially, without the breath, we're all dead. We cease to exist. So bringing this mindful awareness back to ourselves, a good area to do this is with our breath. I will go into this later, but I just wanted to give you a brief introduction of what mindfulness is at an entry style level, so then we can understand when I'm talking about the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So hopefully you guys get a good or better understanding of what mindfulness means now. Basically, we can just look at it like present moment awareness, or being or living in the present moment as much as possible. Okay, so we want to also ensure that when we observe the present moment, that we're also doing it with a non-judgmental and non-reactive attention and awareness. So to break it down into 3 key qualities, when we practice mindfulness, we must ensure we are ardent, so we have an energetic effort involved. We're clearly comprehending, so this could be called wise discernment and not just simply noticing. And then the next one is non-attachment and non-aversion. So in other words, we're free from greed, we're free from anger, and we're free from delusion, okay? So as I start to uncover these 4 foundations in more detail, I hope that now you guys listening will be able to comprehend the summary of this word mindfulness, okay? All right. So firstly, let's look at mindfulness of the body, kayanupassana, okay? This is the first foundation of mindfulness. You can also refer to it as contemplation of the body as the body, internally and externally, with clear awareness. Okay, so how can we do this? Well, some key practices we can use and develop are mindfulness of breathing, which is anapanasati. Now, I've done a meditation, a guided meditation on anapanasati. I've talked a little bit in about some of my other videos, but I'll briefly explain anapanasati for you guys. So, as we've established, sati means mindfulness. Anapana means of the breath or breathing. So, mindfulness of breathing essentially is what anapanasati means. Now, the Buddha has discussed this. He's done a sutta, which is called the Anapanasati Sutta. Now, this one is a whole it's a whole discourse on just breathing, and the Buddha explains in depth how we can use this as our target of awareness with our practice, how we can use this as our primary object in meditation, and how we can utilize it. So basically there's 4 tetrads, and these break up into 16 increments basically. So these 4 tetrads in mindfulness of breathing, they break up into 16 parts, and what we want to do, I'll give us a brief explanation. So when we start our meditation, we want to find a primary object. Now this primary object can be the abdomen, the rising and falling of the chest. This is part of Anapanasati, because as we breathe in, the chest rises, and then as we breathe out, the chest exhales. It closes or goes in. Bad choice of words. Basically, we can use that, or essentially what we wanted to be doing is following the breath, the in and out breath through our nostrils. Now, how we do this, there's a few different techniques, and there's been academic scholars of meditation in the past that have different varying methods. We have Goenkaji, S.N. Goenkaji, who's a layperson born in India, and he actually learnt under a Sayadaw monk, which is a Burmese monk. And the technique that he learnt, this really originates from a man called Ledi Sayadaw, but he taught some other monks, which then in turn have taught S.N. Goenka. So he likes to look at observing the breath essentially on the tip of the lip, the upper lip here. So when we're breathing in, we're getting this cool air sensation go up the nose, and it more times than not is touching an area that might be prominent here on this upper lip. So if we have some perspiration here, we're going to definitely feel that cool air as it comes up. And then as we exhale, we've got this warm air that we're exhaling and we're depleting out of our body. Now, what this is doing, we're finding an area somewhere. It can be on the upper lip, as S.N. Goenka uses, or it can also be inside of the nostril here, or it could be at the back of the inside of the nostril. Wherever you feel the area most prominent with the breath, that's where we want to use and hold our mind as the primary target or the primary object. So as we're observing, we're just having awareness and observation of the breath, the in and out breath. We want to find this target area that is more, we're feeling it more than any other area. And that's where we want to focus and hone in on, okay? Now that's where we draw our attention, and we breathe in and we breathe out. And what we want to do is have observation about this breath. We don't want to change, we don't want to alter it in any stretch of the imagination. We're just purely observing, okay? Almost like a security camera. We're just watching. There's nothing we can do about it, but we can press record. And that's what we're doing by having awareness, is just pressing record and just observing, having pure observation. So, as we're doing this, we want to look at some properties. We want to decompress things a little, or deconstruct, may I say, some things, and look at things and go, okay, am I breathing in long, or am I breathing out long? Am I breathing in short? Am I breathing out short? Am I breathing in shallow? Breathing out shallow? These are the things we want to be looking at as we're observing the breath, okay? These components, when we do this, we're focusing our mind on the breath, and this alleviates a lot of this mind wandering, because we're paying attention and we've got concentration on one primary object, and then therefore the mind doesn't have as much opportunity to start wandering. As you're beginning meditation, it will start to wander, but we take a deep breath and then we go back to our breath, to our primary object. Now, in the Goenka method, after day 3 or day 4 of doing an intense retreat, Goenka kind of falls into the assumption that we've now got a level of concentration, which we call samadhi. And when we do this, what that basically means is we have this unwavering concentration and one-pointedness to the breath for, say, 4 or 5 minutes time. And then say if we get to the 5-minute mark where the mind doesn't wander, and we have this unwavering discipline and concentration of just focusing and watching the breath, that's when we're ready, and Goenka starts to form this triangular sort of process here, and then that is our awareness, okay? That's a Goenka method. The Mahasi method, he tends to look into the rising and falling of the abdomen, and there's also different meditation scholars in the past that have different techniques as well. But essentially that's Anapanasati, and that's one of the forms of mindfulness of the body that we can utilize, which is mindfulness of breathing, okay? So the second thing that we can do is we can be aware of our bodily postures and activities with clear comprehension. So as I mentioned before, sati sampajanya. So as I briefly explained before, it's being aware in the present moment with all daily activities that we're doing, whether we're walking, whether we're sitting down doing meditation, whether we're, say picking the kids up from school, if we're cooking dinner, or even if, for that matter, if we're sitting down and eating, we want to be aware of the grabbing of the food and the bringing the food to the mouth, the chewing of the food, the digestion of the food, and then the swallowing of the food, and so on and so forth. And this is sati sampajanya. It's having mindfulness with clear comprehension. So going back to anapanasati, our primary object is the breath and nothing else. With sati sampajanya, we take it that next step further, and we want to have this mindfulness in all of our daily activities. So reaching, grabbing, lifting, moving, placing. Okay, that is sati sampajanya, okay? That's another variation of what we can do in regards to contemplation of the body. Now, another one is contemplation of the 32 parts of the body. So what that is the Buddha's basically laid out, you guys can Google this if you want. If you just type in contemplations of 32 parts Buddhism, and it will come up in Google, and it will show you a list of the 32 components. I'm not going to go through them all, but basically what it is hair, nails, skin, it can be phlegm, pus, mucus, bile, synovial fluid, the spine, the bones, it could be ligaments, tendons, joints, it can be, the feet, it can be, I don't know if I've mentioned hair, it can be the heart, it can be the liver, the kidneys, the spleen, and I think you get the basic understanding. So we can concentrate in our meditation practice, and we can focus on one object. So perhaps we can focus on the hair, okay? And if you focus enough on the hair, on a certain area of your head, and you just concentrate on the hair, and we can start to contemplate the hair. How is it growing? What's the properties of the hair? What's the reason of the hair? Why are we growing hair out of the body and out of the skin? Why does it grow out of all different areas of our body? Why as we age it discolors and starts going grey and then white? And we can also, as we get deeper in our practice, we can actually feel the sensation of the hair growing, and we can understand the rate of how it's growing. There's all different things that we can contemplate just with looking at the hair of the head, hair of the armpits, or hair of the eyelashes. And all of these things we can contemplate at a deep level. We can also contemplate the nails and the skin. We can maybe perhaps contemplate the warm or the cool air which is brushing over our skin and our hair. And the hair is acting like a signal receptor to our nerves, which are then coming up to our brain and signaling, yes, warmth or wind element or whatever it may be. So that is contemplation of the 32 parts of the body. We can focus on those as well. Now another one, this one's a little bit controversial, but in Buddhism, especially with monks, especially back in the Thai tradition and back in the day, in Buddha's day, this was a very common thing, okay? They didn't have things like cemeteries, and they had things called charnel grounds. Now charnel grounds, unfortunately, is where they just dump dead bodies. I don't sugarcoat it, that's pretty much how it was. So there's 9 stages of body composition or decomposition. So what that is, it might sound quite strange, weird, unusual, perhaps a little crazy to the non-Buddhist mind, but the purpose behind this particular category is to see the body as impermanent, impersonal, and not mine, or not self for that matter, which in turn, it breaks the bond of attachment to physical form and beauty, okay? So we like to, so I'll just step back a bit. So charnel grounds would, when people, like when Buddhist monks used to walk past dead bodies as they were going on pindapata, which means alms round, they would observe a dead body. Now that dead body might have been there for a few days or whatever, but every day they're walking past, they're contemplating and they're looking. The body's now starting to fill with gases, for example, and then the body's starting to bloat, okay? The body's starting to have discoloration, it's starting to perhaps go purple or red, and then after time, as time goes on and progresses, you'll find then insects and animals and maggots and jackals and wolves and all those kinds of creatures used to come and then take their share, and they would get their food, okay? Now, it sounds disgusting and gross, but these contemplations essentially are a very strong form of Kayanapassana, contemplation of the body. It makes us understand that this body is not ours, it's temporary, it's not lasting forever, and essentially we're just borrowing. This is like a vessel and we're borrowing it in this lifetime that we call human life, okay? So that's another contemplation. And when it comes to, you know, this attachment that we have to this physical form of the body, we also like to beautify it as well, you know, like, you know, young men like to, you know, have their skin nice and smooth or perhaps nice and tan from the sun so they look nice. They like to put hair mousse or hair gel in their hair, and they like to have their hair shaped all nice and looking good for the ladies. And if it's for the ladies, they like to, actually for both parties, they like to get plastic surgery, they like to get Botox and try to manipulate and alter the body from its natural process of aging. Now, this is, unfortunately, it's not going to prevent or deter the body from aging. The body is going to age regardless. It's one of the 4 things that we're subject to. We're subject to birth. Once we're subject to birth, it's inevitable that we have aging, sickness and death that are following not far behind. So getting these things done and beautifying the body by getting our nails painted and our eyelashes tinted and doing whatever it may, or curled or whatever it may be, putting makeup on and, you know, wearing nice clothes to try and look good and look appealing to other people, the root cause of all this is kind of defeats the purpose, because the inevitable is going to happen. We're going to age, this body's going to age, and we can all try and fight it, but the inevitable is going to happen eventually. You know, there's people out there that try and take all these supplements and all these things to try and live longer and try and live for a long period of time. Now, that's all good and well, but regardless of what you do, the body's going to age. If it doesn't age externally, it's going to age internally, okay? This, we cannot be defiant when it comes to this. It's what's going to happen, okay? So understanding these things, the contemplations of the body, the 9 stages, is a very good way of developing this understanding of impermanence, suffering, and not self, okay? That's in Pali what we call anicca, dukkha, and anatta. So this is the first 4 foundations of mindfulness, of the contemplation of the body, okay? So we've covered contemplation of the body. Now, coming in at number 2, we have mindfulness or contemplation of feelings. Now, we call this Vedana Upasana. So what we're trying to do here is we aim to be the observer and to simply observe either the pleasant, the unpleasant, or even the neutral feelings as they arise and then inevitably pass away. So just having pure awareness of the arising and passing of these feelings, be it wholesome, unwholesome, or simply neutral feelings, we want to do so without having any form of attachment, clinging, or even aversion towards them. So a couple of examples we can use here are 1, the bodily feelings and mental feelings as they arise. So how I can explain that is the bodily feelings as they arise, a good explanation of both of these would be in a sitting meditation position. So if we're sitting cross-legged on the floor and we're doing our meditation, once we've done 30, 45 minutes or an hour or so, when you're a beginning practitioner, even an intermediate practitioner, you will find things arising in the body, and these bodily sensations are bodily feelings. So for example, you're sitting there and you're trying to focus on your breath, your anapanasati, you're being mindful, you're in the present moment as much as possible, and then we start to understand this arising and passing nature that happens. The reason this occurs is because we have things that are constantly changing and everything is moving. It's all subject to change. So when we're sitting there, we start having pain in our legs, in our hips, in our knee, in our back, in our spine, the back muscles, leg muscles. We might have some tingling, we might have some numbness sensation, or it could even be an excruciating feeling. And that can arise from just sitting there and not moving for a prolonged period of time. Now, what this is doing, it's bringing rise to these now feelings, okay? So we need to understand, instead of attaching to these and going, oh, I don't like this, I need to change my posture, my legs are going to fall off and all this, instead of being melodramatic and thinking like this, we need to look at it and go, okay, pain. So what we do is we shift our attention from our primary object of the awareness of the breath, and then we gently just shift our mind's attention to this feeling that we're having, this pleasant or unpleasant or neutral feeling, in this case unpleasant. And then we just shift our attention there and we go pain. We label it, we note it, we put some awareness to it, and then we bring our attention back to the breath and continue on this. And you'll find more times than not that once painful situation, that numbness, tingling, or whatever was occurring, will dissipate and it will actually fade away. Once that fades away, that's the passing, and then something else will arise. And this arising and passing nature, this has a lot to do with defilements within our body. We need to eradicate these defilements, but until we do, we're going to have this arising and passing nature of sensations, pains, thoughts, feelings, mental feelings, and all these things are going to arise. So these bodily feelings and these mental feelings are just part of the process, and we just need to be aware of them and just have this awareness, okay? So another form that we can look at is worldly, which i.e. reactive, and unworldly, equanimous feelings. So the purpose behind this is to recognize that all these feelings that arise, they're not actually me and they're not mine. They're all fleeting and they're all transient phenomena. So what I mean by equanimous basically means equanimity. So upekkha in Pali we like to call that. And that is basically when you take 3 lines, okay? You have 3 lines. This top line, it represents happiness, ecstasy, joy, tranquility, and all the positive good things, the feel-good things that we have emotionally in our life. The bottom level, obviously, is now the opposite. This is all the suffering and the sadness and depression and grief and all the sadness that you can think of. We have one, we have happiness, and we have the other, which is sadness. In Chinese, they call this yin and yang. You can't have one without the other. You cannot be happy without sadness. You cannot have sadness without happiness. This is a universal law, and this is just the way it is, okay? So if you understand this law, essentially this universal law, you can begin to understand that what we want to be doing is staying in this middle line. So the Buddha called this the middle way, and that is not to attach and cling to this happiness too much, because it's temporary, it's transient, and it's fleeting. It will eventually fade away, and more times than not, you'll end up getting this one, which is the sad and unhappiness. What we want to do as humans is stay in the middle, okay? So like a graph, we don't want to be fluctuating like this. We kind of just want to be cruising. We will be getting a little bit of this, but we're not in this drastic motion, okay? That's what equanimity is, to quickly sum it up. So we want to be equanimous, okay? So having equanimous feelings is having neutral feelings, okay? Neutral feelings is the best way to navigate ourselves through life, to minimize suffering. There's various other ways that suffering arises, but in knowing and understanding this transient nature and this temporary anicca nature of impermanence, we understand that nothing's going to last forever. So if you're sitting cross-legged and you have this pain, it won't last forever. It will pass, okay? But usually, sure enough, something else will come up. There's nothing wrong with this. We're just sitting there and we're just observing. And this will teach us a lot about the mind and our meditation practice, okay? So what this essentially is doing, it's cutting the chain of dependent origination at the link of craving. So dependent origination is a whole nother complex topic, and I'll have to do another video of that, but that's essentially what it's doing. It's cutting the chain of craving when it comes to dependent origination, okay? We call this paticca samuppada, dependent origination. It's there's a whole big topic about this, and it's a very vital and important thing. I will do a video on this in the coming weeks or perhaps months, okay? So hopefully you're following what I'm saying here. If not, please send me an email and I'm happy to respond to you guys more in depth and detail, because it's imperative that we understand the 4 foundations of mindfulness if we want to start doing meditation, okay? If we want to start being serious about doing meditation in our practice, we need to learn the 4 foundations of mindfulness. The Buddha emphasizes this at the end of the Satipatthana Sutta, how important this is. I'll read it out quickly for you now. Basically, this is my summary of it, so it's not word for word, but basically whoever should practice these 4 foundations of mindfulness for 7 years should expect one of 2 results: arahantship in this life, or if there's any substrate left, a non-returner. If for, and then it goes the same formula, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1 years, or even 7 to 1 months, or even half a month or 1 week, should one practice these 4 foundations of mindfulness, they may expect one of 2 results: arahantship or a non-returner. So in Theravada Buddhism, we aim to end this chain of suffering in this life by doing this meditation, accessing and getting liberation and Nibbana, and essentially becoming an arahant, which is someone that has ridded all of the defilements and all of the kilesas, okay? Again, these are other videos and other topics, but I just wanted to emphasize the importance of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. The Buddha said this is a clear path on how to achieve enlightenment in our meditation practice. So super, super important. So send me an email if you're not sure, you have any questions, and I will adhere to get back to you guys, okay? So the third, the third foundation of mindfulness. So this is contemplation of the mind. Now we call this citta upasana, okay? Citta upasana. So contemplation of the mind, or mindfulness of the mind. So again, what we want to ideally be doing here is being the observer and observing the states of mind with clarity. So some examples of this in the mind, is the mind with greed or is it without greed? Is it with anger or is it without anger? Are we delusional or are we undelusional? Are we contracted or distracted? Are we exalted or are we unexalted? Are we concentrated or are we unconcentrated? Are we liberated or are we unliberated? So these observations we should understand with mindfulness, okay? The purpose of this is to see the mind as impersonal, ever-changing process rather than a permanent self or even a controller for that matter, okay? So, just had a mental blank. Yeah, so basically what we want to do is understand all of these things with pure awareness and understand that mindfulness is the leading controller of this. We need to understand our emotions and how we're feeling, okay? So, these different emotions that we go through, are we anger, are we not angry? We need to question everything, okay? These are observations. Now, lastly, essentially we'll go back. So anicca, it means impermanent. Everything in this world is subject to change. Not just the body, not just the mind, not just our thoughts, not just our actions, our deeds, not just everything external and material that we can see, but even planet Earth itself is subject to impermanence. Everything is impermanent. One day, sooner or later, everything will change and cease to exist, okay? And then it will give rise to other things, this arising and passing nature. So understanding impermanence is one of the three insights. So when we do vipassana meditation or vipassana meditation, however you want to pronounce it, we want to be sitting there and observing the nature of impermanence, observing the nature of suffering, dukkha, and observing the understanding of this isn't me, non-self, okay? There's more to it, there's more complexities, okay? So that's what we mean when we talk about anicca, impermanence. It's very important with our practice, with our mindful meditation. So that's anicca. Now, lastly, we have mindfulness of mental objects or dharmas, and we call this dharma upasana. So this is the fourth foundation of the foundations of mindfulness. So this might seem a bit more complex to some viewers, as I need to delve into some other dharmas or teachings of the Buddha to properly understand. I like to refer to these as formulas, but yeah, these are other talks and other discussions. If I go into each one of these, this video could be a couple of hours long. I'm trying to make it a relatively short, compressed video so you guys don't get too bored, okay? So these other factors in Dharma Upasana, potentially, like I said, we need to do more videos to give you guys a better description, but I'll give you guys a brief rundown and feel free to Google them and have a look, but I'll do a video on them sooner or later, okay? So it's essentially contemplating mind objects or phenomena in terms of the teachings of the Buddha, or as we refer to as the dharmas, okay? So these especially are, number one, the 5 hindrances and their potential absences, okay? So the 5 hindrances are basically, number 1 is sensual desire, number 2, ill will, number 3, sloth and torpor, number 4, restlessness, and number 5 is doubt or skeptical doubt. Now, just to briefly explain, these hindrances, they bring rise in our daily life and they also bring rise in our meditation practice. Mainly when it comes to these 5 hindrances, we're referring to as in our meditation practice, and also as I'm speaking in the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which is also meditation, these predominantly are meditative observations and that we're looking at. So we have sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness, and doubt or skeptical doubt. Now the second one, or the second formula I like to call, is the 5 aggregates of clinging, okay? So attaching and clinging. So what they are is form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness, okay? So again, I could do another video on this, and I will in due time, but for now I just want to briefly run down these Dharma Upasana techniques that we can look into. And again, you can Google these. If you go into Google and you can type in Access to Insight, it's a good website, and basically, or Sutta Central, these are places where there's lots of suttas and discussions about Buddhism and the Buddha. So 5 aggregates of clinging will be in there, and it will show you in more detail of what they are, okay? Pretty self-explanatory, really, but you can have a look at them and they'll show you in a Buddhist context what they mean. So the third one in Dharma Upasana is the 6 internal and external sense bases. So these are basically the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body sensations, and then the mind, okay? So the mind faculty itself. So briefly to explain, we have, it says internal and external. So that sounds a little bit confusing, but obviously the eye is internally here, but what are we doing? The proximate cause of the eye is to look and to see. And this creates perception on how we perceive the world and things around us. The ear is a physical form here. Now its proximate cause essentially is to hear and to listen, and then we get sense of sounds and things around us, okay? And this also gives us a perception, which can lead to emotional, how we perceive things emotionally, how we perceive things mentally, and so on and so forth. The third one is the nose. So obviously here is the nose. Its action is to smell things. We can smell beautiful things. We can smell odory things like body odor and unpleasant things. And we can smell neutral things as well. So this again gives us another perception on how we perceive reality. And then the fourth one is the tongue. So the tongue, most of us would look at the tongue and just say, yes, well, the tongue is inside of our mouth, and it's used to taste things, okay? So it's used for, we have lots and lots of taste buds on the surface of our tongue. It's got quite a rough texture, and what it does is when we're chewing food, for example, we have that taste. It's either a pleasant feeling, it's either an unpleasant taste. Sorry, it's a pleasant taste, it's either an unpleasant taste, or it's a neutral taste. It's neither pleasant nor unpleasant, it's just food. Now that's the way essentially we want to look at it. Again, we want to be equanimous. Don't attach too much to, oh, that's delicious, or that tastes disgusting. It's food to nourish this body, to keep it running and to keep it alive for meditation, all right? Now, number 5 is bodily sensations. Actually, go back to the tongue. The tongue can also be used like a knife, like a weapon. We can say things that hurt other people, and we can say very bad things that make others around us not feel very pleasant. This is a negative thing. We have to be very careful with the tongue. Just wanted to put that in there as well. The 5th one, bodily sensations. So what do I mean by this? So we obviously have the skin. It's the largest organ in the body, for those of you that weren't aware. And what its form is when it's a very hot day, the body will start to perspire, won't it? Now what it's actually doing, it's doing a couple of things. It's actually bringing out toxins in our body, number 1, but it's also bringing liquid to this surface. So then when the wind element blows by, it's actually cooling the body down. It's like a little air conditioning kind of natural system that's running through the body. So bodily sensations, when that coolness hits us, we feel the sensation, and we can get goosebumps, these little bumps that happen on our body. We can have this when we have a pleasant sensation like tickling or whatever. These sensations are what we call bodily sensations, okay? They can happen with nerves, the nerve endings in our body. If we hit our tips of our fingers too much on the bench, you'll feel the nerve and it will shoot up and it will give us an unpleasant feeling, all right? So that's number 5. Number 6 is the mental faculty, or the mind. So the mind has a mind of its own, as we like to say. It does whatever it wants, and meditation, we are trying to hone that in and to assess the mind and see what's actually going on and why are we thinking these things, and just to observe and to watch the mind. So that's the 6 internal and external sense bases, okay? Now, another Dharma Upasana, another contemplation of mind objects we can use, is the 7 factors of enlightenment. Now, this is a very important one in reference to the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And what are they? Basically, number 1, we have mindfulness, or sati, okay? We've already talked about that, so that's number 1. Number 2 is investigation. When we're doing the practice, we need to investigate things. We need to open things up and unpack things and look at the properties of things. We emphasize this in the Anapanasati Sutta. We also emphasize that what we're doing in the 4 foundations of mindfulness. We're investigating. We're contemplating the body. We're contemplating the mind. We're contemplating feelings. We're contemplating mental objects. And that is essentially investigating, okay? So these things that I've laid out for us, this is the investigation side of it, okay? Number 3 comes energy. Now, energy, in Pali we call this virya, and this is the second of the 5 spiritual faculties, which I'm not going to talk about tonight, but they are basically, what was I talking about? The 5 spiritual faculties. So we have saddha, which is faith. Second, we have energy, virya. Third is sati, mindfulness. 4th is samadhi, or concentration. And then 5 is panya, or wisdom, okay? So faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. So virya or energy, is the 3rd of the factors of the 7 factors of enlightenment. So we have mindfulness, investigation, energy, and then number 4, we have joy, okay? So joy, we can call in Pali piti, okay? Piti. So joy is a good feeling that will arise when we start getting into levels of access concentration in our meditation. We bring rise to joy. This also happens in jhanic stages of our meditation as well. We bring rise pleasant things to rapture and joy and all these things. So the next one leads on a very similar path, which is tranquility. So tranquility in Pali we like to refer to as passaddhi, okay? Now this one is generally in reference to a technique called samatha meditation, and this is one-pointedness. This is tranquility meditation. What we're trying to achieve here is a deep level of one-pointed focus. So again, doing this, concentrating at a deep level of the anapanasati, the concentration of the breath. This is a form of one-pointed concentration, okay? This, in turn, can lead to jhanic states. Now, there's 4 jhanas, and then there's 4 arupa jhanas, formless realms, but we can talk about that in another topic as well. I just want to briefly cover what these are. Number 6, we have concentration. Concentration in Pali, generally we can refer to that word as samadhi. There's a few different, some of these words are very difficult, like samadhi, for example. It's a Pali and a Sanskrit word, and some of these words are very difficult to actually translate to a word in English. They're not so easy, but generally speaking, it's most common amongst Buddhist people to reference it as concentration. I like to look at it as unified awareness, but each to their own. So that comes in at number 6, and number 7 we have, which we briefly talked about already, equanimity. Okay, so equanimity is, like I mentioned, 3 levels. We want to stay in the middle. Okay. Now, lastly, we have the all-important 4 noble truths, which these are, of course, is number 1, life is suffering. Number 2, what is the origin of suffering? Number 3, what is the cessation of suffering? And number 4, what is the path that leads us out of the cessation of suffering? Now, I can give us a brief explanation. We need to do another video on the 4 Noble Truths. It's quite an extensive topic, relatively basic. If you look at it, if you're just looking at it in a book, it looks pretty straightforward, but there's quite a lot of depth and detail. It's quite heavy material. So, number 1, life is suffering, okay? Number 2, how can we get out of suffering? So, what is the origin of suffering? So what we need to do, so for example, we're subject to 4 things: birth, age, sickness, and death. When we get to sickness and death, we need to understand that this is a form of suffering, okay? Now, what is the origin of it? Is obviously we're getting old and we're passing away. This is just an example. So how we find the origin is we need to get to the root cause of what is causing this suffering. In this case, it is birth, okay? The birth brings rise to the suffering, okay? So we need to look at whatever it is, whatever's creating the suffering in our life, whatever it may be, we need to look at the root cause and we need to rip it out of the ground, so to speak, okay? That's what we need to do. We need to find the absolute origin of it, okay? Now, I like to look at the 4 noble truths and just remove that word suffering, and you can replace it with some other words. For example, if you have anger arise, you can realize, okay, now I'm angry. What is the origin of me feeling angry, okay? Is it somebody that perhaps has said something to brush you up the wrong way or whatever it may be? We need to look at the origin of this. And then the next thing is, the third one is a cessation of suffering. So what the Buddha was trying to say here is, how can we completely eradicate and put a stop to it, okay? So we have suffering, what's the origin of it? Now how can we stop it? How can we finish it so it doesn't come back? How do we stop it, okay? And that's where the 4th one comes in, which is the path to end the cessation of suffering. Now the path is actually, the Buddha's given us another formula which is called the Eightfold Path. And there's 8 different things there. Again, I don't want to go into it because this will be an extremely long video, and I'm trying to keep it to a very short video. I think I've already gone well over, but it is how it is. You can check out the Eightfold Path. If you Google it, it's right view, right intention, right mindfulness concentration. There's all sorts of things that you can have a look at, okay? I don't want to go into detail. So basically that is the all-important and 100% necessary 4 foundations of mindfulness. So to summarize this in a sentence, how I can explain this, we could basically say, this is coming from the Buddha, 1 abides contemplating the body as the body, ardent, clearly comprehending, and mindful, having put away greedy longing and grief for the world. So contemplating either the body, the feelings, the mind, or the mental objects, we can do this by putting aside grief, aversion, anger, and essentially ill will. So in essence, what the 4 foundations of mindfulness set out to achieve is basically what it's doing is training us to understand reality directly, like head on, raw, unfiltered, and without any form of distortion whatsoever, which in turn, it will lead us to insight, vipassana, and that will also lead us to the 3 characteristics of anicca, dukkha, and anatta, impermanence, suffering, and not self. So there you have it. That's the 4 foundations of mindfulness, or Cattaro Satipatthana. This practice in Theravada Buddhism is regarded as the direct path, or even to say the only way for purification of beings and ultimately the realization of Nibbana. So I hope this has helped you guys, or some of you guys out there that are wanting to understand the 4 foundations of mindfulness in reference to our meditation practice. It's a very, very important topic, and I'm very glad that we've touched on it today. And again, if you guys don't understand any of this, it's a bit overwhelming and a bit daunting, please feel free. You can DM me in one of my social media things, Facebook or whatever it may be. And you can also send me an email. The links are there in the description on my YouTube channel. So feel free to do so. And that's all I'm going to talk about today. Hope you guys have a lovely week and a lovely afternoon. And blessings from the Noble Triple Gem, Te Rawan Sadnai.